the 408th meeting of the New York Comics and Picture Story Symposium. This is a weekly reading, lecture, presentation series founded by the cartoonist and educator Ben Catcher over a decade ago. Um, he has invited myself, Bill Cardellopoulos, Lily Correa, and Danny Fingeroth to co-curate this calendar year with him. We receive funding for this series from the Will and Ann Eisner Foundation, which allows us to pay the guest for every session and keep it free for people to attend these sessions. So we're very grateful to them, and we're very grateful to have tonight's guest, Anna Haifisch, who is a cartoonist that I am a huge fan of. I first became familiar with her work with this book, Von Spatz. And we what we decided to do for tonight's session was just have um a discussion between I'm going to just ask Anna questions, but originally Anna had an idea about talking a little bit about book design, what goes into making uh her books or just ideas of good book design. And I think it's a really she'll be a great guest to talk about those things with because I think just in terms of, a lot of people talk about comics as being a combination of words and pictures, and that's true, but the design of how those words and pictures appear and how they appear in a book is often it's very underdiscussed and it's a really big aspect of comics. And I think as visual culture in this country, at least, I think gets a little more deadened by how things appear on the internet or how books are pressured to present themselves to be sold on the internet. Book design, I feel like, it's believing in the beauty of it and the potential of it is definitely something that will be really wonderful to discuss with Anna because her work, her drawings are they're beautiful drawings, and the design of them and the design of her characters are also incredibly beautiful, and they're usually presented in books that aspire to that beauty. So this will be an exciting thing to talk to her about. Her most recent book can be found from Fantagraphics Underground. It's called Is it Ready Made America, Anna? Or you just have to unmute yourself.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's Ready America.
Ready America. Ready America. Okay. We'll talk about that book in just a second. But before we get to some of the questions about what I just spoke about, I realized that I did an interview with Anna a couple years ago, but I didn't ask any questions about maybe how she came to begin drawing and interest in comics. So can you maybe just, as we start off, just talk about some of your earliest memories of drawings, and or just maybe the first time, not necessarily that you made a drawing, but maybe the first time you looked at maybe a drawing printed in a book, and you have a memory of that, and you were interested in it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on this series. I'm born in 86 in East Germany, so I grew up with a lot of Soviet stuff. Beautiful illustration from, of course, Russia and Czech Republic. So that was, yeah, I was surrounded by that until I think the early 90s. So a lot of like animals from the forest like appear when I think of my children's books, like dark bears, like in dark forests with orphans all over the place. And I don't know, like very sad stories. But I remember that I was like equally spooked out and intrigued by the images. And I think I mean, as a child, I didn't copy those things, but even my early drawings were about animals, pretty much.
Do you know the name of some of those books, or do you remember?
Yeah, there is one of the authors is like I think Prokofiev or something, and it's called just funny stories. And the stories are not so funny; they're quite dark. It's like about drowning ducks, and I wish I had it here in my at my house, but it's my studio. I wish I could show it, but it's I mean, it's like this first sight of a children's bookish look, but it's very dark on the second page already because there's a huge problem. Somebody lost their parents. I don't know, some animals. I don't know. It's like I remember that every story feared me or made me sad.
Was there something like early on, like I was just thinking about like one of the earliest memories I have of looking at a book that was had a combination of words and imagery, and it was I had this facsimile of Lewis Carroll's manuscript for Alice in Wonderland that are just like his
Mm.
drawings. And I remember as a kid thinking like, oh, he made up this story and he did the drawings for it. And I was just fascinated by like the unity of those things together. Were these early illustrated books were you like were you like processing that like they were written and drawn or were you just taking them in?
I'm not even sure if they're, I mean, they were definitely, usually the illustrator was named on the cover, and the stories were usually probably like old folk tales or taken from them or fables or something, because they were so, I don't know, old-fashioned or brutal. I don't know. Like, so I didn't feel it was like yeah, a big, like, it came out of one artist's hand, like to put it like this. But yeah, I have to look it up actually. Uh, it's crazy how these books are kind of forming your early visual imagery, but also I mean, I don't remember any author's name, and I barely know how some of the books looked like.
Yeah, I think that is, yeah, you really, I mean, that's true. I remember like having these powerful experiences with children's books when I was really little. Like there's some of my earliest memories, but even the ones I really love, I can't remember. I can remember what the cover looks like.
Mhm.
The ones that I read like 100, but I can't remember necessarily the title as I'm calling them
Yeah,
up in my mind now. I can't remember the title necessarily, or unless they're like really, unless they're ones that are shared by everyone. But the ones
yeah,
that are
yeah,
maybe
right.
specific to me, I can't recall the title or the author's name.
Yeah, yeah, right. I don't know if is Janosch a familiar name in the US?
Not to
He's a
me, maybe to some people in our audience.
Yeah, it's because he's insanely popular. He's like Polish German, and now I think he's 96 years old or something. And I mean, it's probably his last couple of years on this planet, but he was extremely important to me because his way of writing was extremely funny and also very brutal and sad because he didn't have a high opinion of family itself because he grew up with an alcoholic father and like bitter poverty. And that's where his stories are stemming from. But also his drawing style, it looks extremely loose, and the watercolors are smudging over like the undried ink. And some people find it extremely ugly, but I always liked it and loved it. Even as a kid, I was looking at it and I thought like, what a beautiful mess.
Can you spell out that name for us just in
I
case
can I
people...
can write it in the chat actually because I don't know if there
Okay, someone's oh you wrote it as Janosch, just in case people are watching this on YouTube and don't have
oh
the
yeah,
chat.
right, right.
Um when did when did comics come in? Did you like did comics come later or were there popular examples of comics that maybe you were seeing around the same time or was it a natural evolution to that?
Well, like I think every European, I grew up with the Franco-Belgian stuff. Like Asterix was extremely important to me. Then Tim and Struppi, like Tintin, the Smurfs. And yeah, I mean, I read all of it because it was available in the public library. And what I always liked as a kid was like you can get a whole series, like 6 to 8 books at the same time. And like today, sometimes when there's a real good like TV series and you see like, oh cool, there's like another 7 episodes left. It gives you a sense of relief, or I don't know. And that's how I felt as a kid when I had the 6 to 8 or even 10 issues of, I don't know, Asterix laying next to my bed, even though I knew them all by heart, but it was just amazing. So
That they
yeah,
were
and
there
then
ready like that you weren't going to exhaust them yet. You had them to pull from.
yeah, yeah, it was, I mean, I liked the series format a lot as a kid, that it was just ongoing and there will be more and more and more and more books. And then when I was a teenager, I was so lucky because the German publisher Reprodukt I'm with today also, but Dirk Rehm, the publisher, he put out Julie Doucet, Daniel Klaus, like all the really great American, like late 90s, early 2000s stuff. For me, I think it's one of the greatest eras of comics, actually. And then I was exposed to this kind of work, of course, and that opened my eyes. And at the same time in France, there was Louis Trondheim and Johannes Farr and Christophe Blanc. And for me, that was eye-opening. And I thought, like, I really want to do this too. But I didn't know how, of course.
I remember like my some of my first memories of reading having comics read to me actually were Tintin. And I think in that, that having a bunch of books, looking at the back of I don't know how they were presented in Germany, but for me, like they were presented there was a grid of all the available books on the back,
Oh,
and I
yeah,
could
yeah,
just
yeah.
look at that forever. But I do was like you mentioned Asterix first. For you and maybe children you knew was Asterix more important or was
Yeah.
Tintin okay?
Yeah, I think Asterix was, at least in Germany, that was the number one, I think, because Tintin was already kind of, I mean, it's so idiotic, like felt kind of more outdated than
Right.
Asterix. I mean, Asterix is, I mean, it's a Roman Empire, but yeah, for some reason it felt quite modern. And there was also, I think, a couple of animated movies, and when these were on TV, that meant we were allowed to stay up late. And my favorite evenings, actually.
When Reproduct started publishing Dan Clowes and Julie Doucet, did this lead you, was that the moment where you started maybe drawing your own comics? Um,
Definitely, because those were the first doing, I mean, I hate the term diary comics, but autobio or, yeah, or even diary comics. And that felt so much more approachable. And of course, I mean, I was 14, 15 when I discovered those books, and I had nothing to say, of course. I mean, come on, a 14-year-old, like, what's there to write and draw about? But I always thought, like, maybe one time I can tell a story like Julie to say, I thought, like, this life seems adventurous and wild.
Did you self-publish that early work? Because I always feel there's a difference in like what like I mean 14 or so you started doing these at 14 and 15. I think in the US there's such a different idea of what making mini comics is versus the times I've been to Europe, the idea of self-publishing mini comics. Did it make sense to you to say, "Oh, it seems like people like Julie Doucet are talking about making zines and self-publishing in their comics that are now published. Did that idea get communicated to you through that, or was there how did that process go of like actually sharing this work with people?
I think also it came from mixtapes, like cassettes, because that was still a cool thing to share among friends. And that is, I mean, that is so close to making a little zine and comic, because also you have to make the cover for the mixtape, and sometimes I made the booklet a little zine or something like this.
Oh, cool.
And my uncle, he had a broken copy machine, like a really small one, an A4 one that printed quite grayish stuff, but I thought that is amazing. Like I always like up until today, I always like to make more than one piece. That's why I'm so much into making. And I always like to press a button and have 10 drawings instead of just one.
Yeah. So did you start releasing comics on your own that weren't connected to mixtapes, or did you? Because the first work I saw by you were, I think prior to this book, I'd seen maybe some collaborations you'd done with Andy Burkholder.
Yeah,
Um,
Andy, but that was maybe around the time of von Spatz, but also with James Turek before. And then even before, long before, like I did a series called Gilbert. Um, those were some mini comics I screen printed, like every page. I don't know why in one color, and it was like some like poop brown. I don't know. It was not necessary to screen print the whole thing, but for some reason I wanted to do that. And yeah, when I was forgot, maybe when I was 20, 21, I made mini comics called The Buddies. They ended up at Desert Island. I think those were the first ones that made it over the ocean.
do you think that's where people? Do you think that process of them being in Desert Island and just the multiples becoming a book and traveling around the world? Do you think that's where people here started hearing about your work, or
Oh
how would
yeah,
you? describe that process.
I totally forgot that I left the Buddies comics at Desert Island, and I was also glad to never see them again because they're quite embarrassing. It's a dog and a cat walking around and doing nothing. Very original. And then, but when Nick Gazin from Vice magazine, like back in the day, like 2016, asked me to do a weekly series, um, I asked him back just like, how come you're asking me? Like, I mean, I'm in Germany and you're in New York. Like, how come you discovered my work? And Instagram wasn't a thing and whatever. And he was like, I bought these Buddies comics at Desert Island. And I thought like, oh shit. I mean, I always encourage people to still do physical comics because you never know where they end up, like who gets them in their hands. At the end of the day, I mean, it lends you a sweet deal or something.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, those books being here in the US and then people connecting with them. Your new book, Ready America, has it's hard to describe. I really enjoyed looking at it today, and it's mostly drawings of signs, storefronts that you've seen. Um, in the United States, and then it has some drawings of your animals alongside things. And so I kind of want to transition into, this idea that you initially had a long time ago for maybe what we talk about book design, but just the idea of looking at this visual designs in this country. And I think you were saying they're mostly from the West Coast. And I think they might be some of the images you pick, some people might just be like, oh, this is just like visual, this is just visual fog, like all these storefronts. I've become a nerd to it. I don't see anything in it. But I wouldn't say that you're exactly aestheticizing them or not, but I do assume you have some kind of appreciation for them. What about these designs of these different storefronts? And some of them have like foreign lettering and then English lettering and there's like a lot of confusion in the imagery. What about them, led you to want to draw a book that's all focused on this? And what do you see in that kind of design?
Well, I have to start maybe when I started studying here in Leipzig at the art school. The art school is very known for bookmaking and printmaking and typography and all these things that are related to making a book. And yeah, my whole education, typography was a huge part of it. I didn't choose to be a graphic designer, but I have a lot of friends who became designers. And I was always like fascinated, of course, by the looks and also drawing letters. I always enjoyed it because also as a bit of a brainless activity. But when I went to LA for 3 months, I I saw all these signs like on the street at every business. I thought like, wow, they're ignoring every rule, like accidentally, like don't choose too many fonts, like don't choose too many sizes, and all these like kind of basic rules from like the modernism, like Chichot or whatever. Like it was completely ignored, and one could say these signs were ugly or something, but like being next to each other, on top of each other, like in one like image, I thought it's extremely beautiful. Like there is something so innocent and sweet about it. Yeah, so I've enjoyed drawing these storefronts and signs, and yeah, it was also just like the business names on them. I thought it's insanely funny. Having a spa next, some weird fruity sounding spa next to a weird church or funeral service or something. You can't find something like this in Germany, I would say, or even in Europe. It's for me, it looks completely foreign, and that's yeah. I mean, of course, for the average American, I guess it's extremely boring. It's what every strip mall looks like, I guess.
Well,
But
no, I think
I
it's interesting because like do you think that's the I feel like maybe design in Europe there's if I had to define what I think the difference is, it's that there's more of a standard. I guess
Mhm.
maybe I could ask you what you see as like the primary differences. Like you're saying there's like this like disregarding the rules of modernism in American design. Would that be, are there more differences that you see between the two? I feel like especially like when you come into New York, maybe after visiting Europe, it's like there's just the city itself feels like it's just being created without it's this massive project, this city, and it's being created without like any there's like no plan and it's just going and going and going. But I'm wondering what you might yeah, what you might see as the primary difference between the two.
Yeah, I mean, New York, I find it difficult because New York, I feel like doesn't look so chaotic as I think the rest of America or like even the rural lands or the West Coast. I mean, in terms of typography and science, but I feel like the biggest difference is maybe I don't know. It's just coming up in my head, but is that the signs are pretty emotional, even the business sign of some lawyer. Because I mean, here you would use a serif font that's I don't know, a bit has a longer capital height or whatever. But like over there, somebody would just think like in an emotional way, like I wanted to look modern and like
Right.
future is a good word here and like use some weird alien font or something like this and it's like what the fuck, you're a lawyer. I mean here you could close your business like it's you would be taken seriously but like in LA it looks like maybe this guy is like I don't know good for film like I don't know riots or whatever. I have no idea. Like for some reason, people choose like wildly what suits their business best or their personality, and that makes it for me quite emotional. I don't know.
It's
It's not a general rule I would apply on everything, but it's very individual, I would say.
yeah, it's expressive, even if it's yeah, even if it's kind of like a
That's a very euphemistic term, yeah.
what in this new book, there's these drawings of it's mostly these or is it done with colored pencils mostly?
Hmm. Like marker, ink, and colored pencils, yeah.
And then there's drawings where you insert portraits of animals that we've become familiar with in the rest of your work. And to me, it's really beautiful looking through and seeing these, you know, the pages are split into two. And there'll be a drawing of a portrait of an animal on some pages every now and then these constant recreations of logos and storefronts. If someone was just looking through this someone comes into the comic book store because it's an FU book, so it'll mostly be in comic book stores in the US.
Mhm.
And they're you know they're coming in to pick up X-Men or whatever, and they pick this up and they're like what am I supposed to make of like why is there a dog here and this? For you, if you were just off the top of your head, what were you thinking with that? I mean, I have my feelings about it, but we have you here.
Yeah, well, the animals in the book make sense because it's either these, like, I've never seen so many dogs in sweaters, like designer sweaters, than in LA. And also the other animals are mostly like either coyotes, of course, like the wildlife, but also Looney Tunes characters or Sesame Street characters. So they are definitely taken from American pop culture. And then there's a third part in the book that's more of like it makes it a bit more grim, like all the emergency stuff that you could see at least on the West Coast, like the wildfire stuff, the earthquake emergency sets, like the little backpacks, because that's where the title comes from. Ready America. It's like when I went into my room in this residency in LA, I opened the cupboard and then there was a little backpack sitting in there and it said Ready America. And I opened it and it was like, I don't know, like a little supply of water, a little supply of some protein, uh, a little light, a little like hand crank radio, like some stupid shit you would never need if, I mean, the world goes to shit. But it showed a bit of the paranoia, like that's looming under this excessive um, abundance that LA has to offer. And then here and there, you would see like emergency trainings or all over the place. There's this wildfire, whatever signage. And I thought like, wow, that's quite interesting. Like next to wonderful like pet clinics, you have a sign that warns you that you might die on this cliff in a heartbeat. I don't know.
So the drawings of the animals are also it's like it's how how Americans design their pets or how Americans dress their pets.
I mean, I saw, I think I've never seen, I think once a day I saw a dog in an expensive sweater in a stroller. I
Hmm.
mean, and I
Yeah.
thought, I mean, that's the wildlife, I guess.
Well,
You can see that. But
when we
yeah,
need to break into that protein pack, we'll have water, protein pack for one day, and an animal in a sweatshirt. So
yeah, I mean, the animal would be the most useful, I guess.
it's true. What all your books I think do, with the exception of the artist, where I'm not, I, it's hard for me to refer to the design of the artist necessarily as a human or an animal, but I don't. It's rare that you draw. I'm having a hard time recalling times you've drawn a human. In terms of design, is it just are animals a good, or is that I mean I think if we're going to talk about book design, but just in terms of character design, I think that is one of the things that sets you apart from so many of your peers, how impeccable your character design is. Have you ever attempted designing just human characters, or are animals just a better, more beautiful template for design, or more exciting?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I only if I have to for illustration jobs. There's I drew some humans, and I mean, it doesn't hurt or anything, but it's not. I mean, it's not fun for me. I love to think. I mean, even if I look at people on the street, I see a lot of ducks or raccoons. You know, I mean, it's just more fun to put. Yeah, to draw animals first of all, but also to put some characteristics onto yeah into an animal and then eventually draw it.
This story from Shappy Fuji-san, I could see this story being done with a human character. But can you talk about, like, does the thought ever cross your, like, because this is less of a funny story. It's a very, I thought, very sensitive, very beautiful story. And I love the design of this dog character at the center. But do you ever, like, when you're working on something like this, you're like, oh, maybe this could be a human story, or is that it's just like an irrelevant question?
I mean, yeah, it's for me, it's really not, yeah, it doesn't really cross my mind. Also, I mean, it's more of a rabbit, or yeah, maybe
Oh,
it's a duck.
sorry.
I mean, it's a rabbit, but he goes to the lake, and then the squid comes out and gives him a little bottle of ink. So, I mean, it's quite natural that two animals are talking to each other than a human and a squid.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
that's
But
true. That would be more unnatural. Um, what are for you? What are examples of maybe book design that you've really appreciated, or that what are maybe, like, when you're just what's an example in your mind of maybe with your own work, that the way your work's been published in the U.S. What are examples that you consider really good book design, or what are properties that you think are important for good, effective book design?
I mean, I think what New York Review of Comics is doing, they have some good book design, I would say. And then I like New School from Dash Shaw. I think that book design is, I mean, it's so weird, and the decisions on cover and color, I think, I mean, I everything that's weird speaks to me. That so it doesn't mean it sells, I guess. Like it's um we have to take out the sale aspect of a book through its cover in America, but I think a good cover is weird. I mean, you have to ask yourself twice, maybe like, oh, what is this? And it has to be weird enough to pick it up and to have a look into it.
Do you
And
see?
then,
I
I mean,
think one thing I see in, like, contemporary book design, and maybe I'm curious to know of whether you see this or not, but I feel like there's a lot of concern with explaining the book. Like, it's kind of the opposite of what you just said. What I see a lot of the time, where, like, a big fear that people will be confused about what's in the book, like very descriptive imagery and just descriptive explanations of what's going to be in the book. Um, Do you is that is do you see a lot of that, or do you feel that the examples you just cited, like New School by Dash, are rare examples of contemporary book design, or
Yeah, I think it's rare because I mean a lot of book design, I mean, has to serve a common purpose of selling. But I mean, I can't really agree because I'm not the one who buys the maybe the mainstream stuff or that's the stuff that's certainly selling so well. But I'm yeah, I'm a believer in doing something new or like trying to go with the story and help the story through the book, through the format, through the paper, through the cover, of course. I mean, I think it's all one package. And I think a lot of publishers miss out on the opportunity of maybe changing uh, little things to make it better. And it's even, I mean, it's sometimes it's even cheaper to make a cool book design. It doesn't always have to be the big hardcover edition or something if it doesn't help the story.
what are some of the little things that come to mind for you? What are maybe
Well, I
little
mean,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, paper quality and like how the book, I mean, if you open a book and it cracks, like it's like you have to like to force the book to open and it's like a kind of a violent act. And I always feel like, oh, that's horrible. And then what's a lot of times, it happens to a lot of US books too, that the direction of the paper little paper strings, or I don't know how you call them, is in the wrong way. So like turning the page is like against the natural feel of the paper, against the natural fiber of the paper. And I think if you go sometimes with the basic rule and the fiber goes like this, the page will go smoothly, just
Yeah.
lovely. But also how you, I mean, I'm a big fan of nice and floppy soft covers. I think they have a good feel. They have a um, lovely weight. You can read them in bed without like cracking a tooth when you, I don't know, when it falls on you. And yeah, but
I
yeah, it
published
doesn't.
this book of an artist named E.A. Bethea. And the first book I did with her had it's like
I
has the
love her work.
yeah. And the first book I published with her has like the cheapest paper in the world.
Yeah,
And it was partly a cost consideration, but I thought that it really suited her work. And some people would be like, "Oh, this is I mean, this paper is really it's okay. I can read it makes her work readable, but it's this is very low quality paper." But I remember you wrote about it on Instagram. You were like that you loved how cheap the paper was
yeah,
in the book. So, and it's yeah, it's with that book you can truly open it up without, and maybe that kind of relates to those early Tintin and Asterix books that because they're for, you know, kids read those and they're very durable. I still have the Tintin books I had as a kid and they're very beaten up, but they're as readable as possible.
yeah. And I mean, at the end, I think the whole book design has to serve the story and to serve the content, of course. I mean, uh, yeah, I think it like with Bethea, I think like her work, like I'm just thinking of like all killer, no filler. Um, I think it needs to be on this paper. It needs like the line needs a rough open paper, like an uncoated paper. It would be so weird if that would be on glossy, heavy stock. That would feel wrong in so many ways. So yeah, I
I
think the
have
best.
two. Oh, I'm sorry. Please keep going.
No. That's I was just repeating what I thought. Yeah.
I have two editions of your work here. I have this book from Fantagraphics Shappy, and then I have the perfectly acceptable edition of the Mouse Glass, and this book reprints what's in here. How for you? These are like two different. Here's one. It has this one has they feel different. This one has this spiral binding. For you, how what's your feeling about these two books, and how do you feel? I mean, they have different kinds of the paper feels different. I mean, this was, I believe, was this did Matt from Perfectly Acceptable? Is this Riso printed?
Yeah.
So for you, and then this is, you know, this is offset printed, I'd assume. Um, for you, what is the difference in how you feel as a reader or how you feel as an artist with these books out in the world in these different ways?
Yeah, I mean, working with Matt David is the best for an artist because he cares so much about book design. Also, he finds ways of trying different stuff with the material. For instance, for the mouse class, I mean, it's the perfectly ugly spiral binding. It's really a horrible material, but he found a way to print even the title on the spine. It's and I always find this amazing to work with him because I have an idea about how a book could be, and I mean we are 6,000 kilometers apart, but I share an idea what it could be, and he comes back with I don't know 3 to 5 options of like how can we print it, like the format, the binding, and I mean he's really on top of things and where to find it in Chicago and how to produce it, and it's always fun. And I like to be involved in these processes. I don't know about other artists; they might not. Yeah, they might not like it at all, but for me, it's important. And with the Fanta edition, I like that it's the same size and that Eric Reynolds agreed to printing it in spot colors because the whole book wouldn't work if it would be CMYK because it's the colors that really need to interact with each other. And yeah, but the overall production at Fantagraphics, I cannot really choose the paper like as I would with other publishers. It's either I think it's either coded or uncoated, and then that's it pretty much.
Do you yeah, just out of curiosity, did you try to weigh in on the these are just
Yeah, yeah,
interesting
a little
questions
bit.
to
And
me.
I mean, Eric let me, and the designer at this time, I think he left. I forgot. Maybe his name was Paul, but he also, I mean, he did a great job. But
Yeah.
it's just not their workflow. I think it's against it. It's something they don't really um, spend want to spend a million years on, of course. And I understand this. And I usually trust the foreign publishers with their decisions because they are the ones who have to sell it. And I go with what they suggest upon my suggestion.
The differences between these two editions, this is the Rotopol von Spatz. And this is, I think, the first time I brought one of your books home and really spent a lot of time with it. And there was this beautiful, I thought Rotopol had this great insert for U.S. readers
Yeah.
translate it. And so I really remember looking at this work so closely because I had to translate it as I was reading it. So here's the Rotopol edition. Um, and then here's the Drawn and Quarterly edition. To me, maybe this is a more subtle difference. But how do you feel about there's a difference in scale.
Mhm.
How do you feel about the differences between, and it's different colors on the cover. So were you involved in those? Was this your decision to have this edition be
I don't,
different color?
yeah, yeah. I mean, a different cover. I like the idea because it's if the title stays the same, it's I don't want to confuse people when they order it online somewhere that they are disappointed that it's in the wrong language or something. That just to make it clear, the cover looks different. That helps a lot. And then with the D&Q edition, I feel like it's happening with a lot of North American publishers that they scale the comics down a lot, like the European ones. At least the ones I know, and I saw the American editions, they always scale down to a um, yeah, to a weirder size, which I don't mind so much, and but I wonder why that is. Probably because of economic reasons to get yeah, to get the most out of a printing sheet, but some comics can take it and some can't. And I think von Spatz can take it definitely because my original drawings for von Spatz somewhere around like letter size. So I'm fine with the D&Q edition and on this book. Yeah.
You're very I think what you've been saying with a lot of these answers is that you and I think you described this with Matt Davis from Perfectly Acceptable. You're very sensitive to the whole work. It's sensitive to how the drawings are designed, sensitive to, the act of comic making itself, but then how it ends up down to the grain of the paper. You said some work can't withstand being shrunk down, and I've noticed that too from many publishers in the United States at least. I do see books reducing in size more and more and more when I just go into the bookstore. What's work that you think? I mean, I don't want to force you to name names, but what's kind of work that maybe we can talk about work that we don't know if it's been shrunk down, but what are maybe some cartoonists that you think would be hurt if their work has been shrunk down or what would be shrunk down? I always
I
think
mean,
like Peanuts can like withstand anything, right? I mean,
yeah.
it's so stark and durable. You can shrink it down or blow it up, and it's just like the design is so strong that it can't be destroyed. But some work is not that way.
Yeah, yeah, no, I remember I saw the Christoph Blanc editions, the American ones, and I don't know which publisher that was, maybe First Second or something. And they were significantly like from the French album format down to the French Butt size, at least, even smaller, I think. And that hurt a lot because Blanc's line is so, I mean, the shading is so subtle and like it's a ton of lines. And then when it got shrunk down and then printed on shitty paper, it was just like a smudge, like a blur of ink. And I mean, he's one of the best inkers, I think. But yeah,
That's
I
a
don't
great
know.
example because I had heard of Blaine's work, and then I think for readers in the US, you're trying to get editions of his work. And there were editions that came out from MBM that weren't that tiny, but still felt you could just tell looking at those editions that there was something, there had been some interference with the work, although it wasn't that bad. And then when you saw those works that came out from First Second, it just like I wouldn't be able to recommend this work to someone because it had been reduced to such a degree and I think was on very shiny paper, which did not serve the work well. And then later I saw an edition of the work, I can't recall the title of it, that was at the proper size and it was like a completely different, it was like a
Yeah,
completely
yeah.
different artist.
I think they hurt Blanc with that because I think he never landed in America with his work because of the shitty editions. I think, I mean, it's a big factor. I mean, it's horrible books like this shiny, sharp paper where you can cut yourself and this heavy stock. I don't know. It was, I was shocked when I saw it. And I mean, Gabe didn't carry it. It was in some mainstream comic shop. And I was like, oh, wow, they got Blanc. And then I looked at it, I was like, oh, no.
Yeah,
It's
it
like,
was kind of to me it was kind of
fine.
a tragedy because it wasn't from a small publisher that Blame was coming out. It was from a publisher that was making this concerted effort to have their works in normal, bookshops that most of America would go to. And yeah, I mean, I think that the sensitivity that you're talking about the whole product of a book, there, it's most of America's introduction to this author who I think should be enjoyed by everyone here. He's not a vastly experimental artist. He's a very crowd-pleasing, easy to love artist, and
Mhm.
him being introduced in
Absolutely.
that way is yeah, it's a complete mistranslation of his work, not in the words, but in the visual words, in the visual storytelling.
Yeah. And then I remember when I was a kid, you know Nutella, right? Like this chocolate spread.
Yes.
And with big jaws, they had a lid and then a little transparent window in the lid. And there was a little comic book for, I don't know, sometimes some limited editions of Asterix or the Smurfs. And they shrunk it down really like to matchbox size. And it worked. Like a
Yeah.
48 page uh, comic, like French comic. I mean, translated in German, but it was perfectly readable. And I remember as a kid, it was my favorite thing, like to open up the lid, get the little comic out, and put it in my pocket and just read it in school. Like,
Wow, I have to ask other people in the United States who have had Nutella as kids if there were ever comics inserted. I don't think we ever yeah, we lack that sensitivity to the Nutella experience as well. That's amazing.
but I was surprised how small you can go with even like a detailed French comic like Asterix or the Smurfs, or like Belgian. But it's yeah, it was remarkable. It was completely readable. I mean, to children, probably not to folks over 40, but who cares?
What's what's work that because I mentioned Peanuts, what's work that you're mentioning these works that were reduced. What's some other work you think is strong enough from cartoonists that can withstand any kind of design that will retain.
I think Joe Kessler is a size wizard in terms of, I mean, his originals. I mean, the British cartoonist who is also a part of Breakdown Press, the British publisher. And I mean, his original drawings, they're quite big. They are like I would say A3. I don't know what that is in US size, but it's like really big. And then the books he publishes are they're fairly small. And I like the transition. And when I look at the originals, I think like, wow, they're amazing. And then when I look at the book, I still think, wow, the drawings are amazing. And they work in a lot of different formats. And I'm yeah, I envy this because it's very rare that you can do it with. I mean, with my drawings, you cannot really do this. It's if you blow it up too much, I don't know. I mean, in my opinion, it looks stupid.
What I have a couple more questions for Anna. I'm gonna encourage people in the chat to start asking your own questions. It's a really great opportunity to be able to talk to this cartoonist. So I encourage you guys as I ask these two questions to ask your own questions in the chat. And you can tell me to read your question, or I can put you on camera and you can read the question yourself. Um, I'm wondering, what in terms of discussions you've had with publishers, what kind of negotiations and compromises have gone into um, the making of your books that you've found interesting in terms of what we're talking about, compromises you've made that have worked out, compromises that you felt have maybe not worked out, just anything along those lines.
There's hold on. There's one book. It didn't end up in the States yet because the shipping didn't work. But it's a smaller comic. It's pocket size. It's called Mouse in Residence, and it's just like one color. And the German publisher Spector Books, they are mostly known for like architectural books, design books, art books, theory, a ton of theory, and also some novels. And I like the idea that to hide a comic in a novel jacket.
Hmm.
Or when you pull it out of in a bookshop, like a normal bookshop, and you open the book and then you discover a comic. Either you're disgusted or you buy it because it's in the art section or whatever, or in the theory section. So I liked this whole design of this sneaky thing. But all the other editions, the Swedish one, the French one, like all the other languages, they chose hold on, under the jacket there is a bit of a real cover. I mean,
Hmm.
out font and everything, but they chose an image and they chose to make it visible as a comic book. And I was not really happy about it, but I totally understood all the decisions because, yeah, they cannot afford a cruel joke like this, like to um to disguise this comic book.
I'm curious in those instances, did you yeah, I'm just curious of the discussion you had with those editions. Did you explain how how nice you thought it turned out with that conceit and they were I mean, I'm always interested like with comics when they so many people self-publish their work and they have complete say over how the entire product looks. And I think sometimes when people are doing things like I remember Kim Deitch serialized this story, Alias the Cat, as a just a comic book from Fantagraphics. And I think because it was priced very cheaply, he could make the covers look. I mean, the covers of those comics look just beyond like they're some of the most beautiful covers I've ever seen, and they're just like $4. And then when the book got collected, it was collected by a very prestigious publisher in the United States, Pantheon, and they're working with like a very big name designer. And I always wonder what Kim knows how to design his work. He understands design as part of what he's doing with his art. And when that book came out, it completely had lost I think the beauty of his work almost entirely on the cover. I mean, the beauty is within the book. So I wonder when these things happen, how much you're brought into the process, or how much of a struggle it is because you have some, to me, you'd be like a resource to work with for a publisher because you have real thoughts about this stuff.
Yeah, but I mean the publishers who wanted to translate this book, they knew the German edition, and they told me straight away like anything but but this, just a mouse trap on the cover, nothing else. We can't do it. So that
Yeah.
was out the window pretty quickly. But what I kept with pretty much all the publishers was the format and the pocket book uh, feel, because that was extremely important to me. The only ones who made it a hardcover were the French ones, and that is the only edition I feel like that yeah, it doesn't work at all in this yeah, with this book. Also with the look of the drawings, because it's quite rough looking for my yeah, I mean if usually I ink everything, and this is basically still stuck in the sketch stadium. So I think a soft cover and the pocket format, the original one, like the very American pocket format, is perfect for this. So I fought for that. I mean, sometimes you have to know what you're fighting for.
You have to choose your battles for sure. For sure. The last question I had for you was the last two books I've seen from you in the US, I believe are Shappy and Ready America. And it seems like you're going in this direction that's, I mean, to me, it still is part of the comic tradition. It's to me, I don't see them as illustrated books. I don't see them as picture books. To me, they work as comic narratives, if that even matters. But I was wondering if you, if I look at the artist and I look at Von Spatz, they're, the designs are, it's panels. So I'm wondering if you're, Ready America is like broken into two panels, but I wouldn't call it a traditional comic. So I'm wondering if you felt constrained by that idea of the paneling that we'd like see in the artist, that has just, a very typical comics grid. I'm just wondering if that's something you're moving away, and the Drifter as well. I mean that these are these like large, talk about a beautifully made book from Perfectly Acceptable. This is really one of them. And yeah, these are just one image to a page, given as much space as they need to have. So I'm wondering if that's something that you've been conscious of kind of moving away from that paneling.
Yeah, I want to move back actually. I became quite annoyed by the traditional panel format because of all the repetition. Like I felt like, oh, why am I drawing this character 1,000 times? Like entering a room, sitting down, drinking a bowl of milk or whatever. And
Yeah.
I thought, I felt like it's unnecessary, because when I looked, I mean, at paintings, sometimes I need 20 pages to tell the same story as a painter in one image. And and I felt like that's insanely stupid, actually. So I tried to condense as much as I could in um, in the drawings, and that was my goal for a long time. But now I feel like I really, really want to go back to the traditional format. It's been a bit of a vacation.
That's in what so what made you want to come back to that?
Because now I like the idea again of the also of the graphics of a grid. I just aesthetically, I find it very pleasing at the moment. Um, and also I feel like, I mean, it's a bit of a challenge, but yeah, I want to go back to traditional, like paneling, traditional speech bubbles. I feel like that's my home, actually. It's like coming home.
Oh, well, that's exciting. Yeah, I find both styles beautiful, but I was worried that I mean, I think there's something about I don't know. I love that early style, so I'm glad that hasn't been discarded forever.
No,
Um,
not at all. I mean, but I need a bit of a of different phases, because I get yeah, I turn into a crazy person. I think if I just keep drawing into little boxes, I might lose it.
Nika has many questions. I'm going to read them. Anna, I was curious how you develop ideas and take them from start to finish. And along that note, when might you abandon an idea or what keeps you going knowing that it's going to work?
I'm always cheating, I think, because I never do a long arch story, like from beginning to the end. It's always in chapters or in like little short stories, one after the other. So that helps a lot to maybe chop it down. I mean, at least that works for me because I wouldn't be able to go from one end to the other and then do that very traditional thumbnailing and then inking and or penciling, inking, like this whole process. I find it extremely boring and I'm impatient. I need to draw some pages and I need to see the spread and the result. And what also helps with that process is like that I can insert stuff and also take a lot of stuff out. That happens usually in the process or at the end. I throw out a lot of pages. And then I usually see, I mean, some stories or some projects are not, I cannot save them because they're shit from the beginning. And I realize it at probably like at one third in, like usually. It's not super far in, but yeah, it happened to me as well. A lot of times actually. But usually what I do is like at the end, like to look at everything and then see what helps the story. And then I'm really good at throwing stuff out. I don't have hard feelings usually with stuff that doesn't help or is feels weird, even though those were the first pages drawn or something.
When you throw them out, do you literally throw them out or do you just set them aside?
No, I don't throw them in the trash, but yeah, I put them in the same folder. Like I have these archive boxes where I throw the for each book I throw the drawings in, and then yeah. Usually I mean, I put the pages on the wall in the studio, and then it's cool to rearrange, and I like this process a lot.
Oh, you're freezing up a little.
Yeah, this to
I don't know if I'm frozen up or if Anna is.
maybe both.
Okay, we'll just wait a second to.
Austin, but we can hear you fine.
Ah, yeah, you're back, I guess.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. So yeah, I just missed the last part of what you said, but Nika actually had another question. So I'll just go to that one. Do you use any particular software in order to make your work, or is it all by hand?
I mean, I draw very traditionally ink on paper, and then I scan the work, and then I use Photoshop to color the pages. It depends, but usually it's Photoshop, and then if I don't do it by hand, and then I use InDesign to yeah to lay out the book. That's usually the process.
I used to see so many, you used to post so many videos online, Instagram stories of when you were drawing. Is the algorithm preventing me from seeing those, or do you still do those?
I want to go back to this as well, but I haven't done it in a while because like in the early days of Instagram stories, I felt it was so much fun, and now I have to remind myself, and then I think like, ah, if it's not so much fun, I don't do it. But actually, it's easy. I kind of want to go back to this
I love
because
those.
it
Those were
feels
exciting
like
to see.
yeah. I mean, it was fun because a lot of people wrote also some stupid stuff, and I found it funny.
What did they write?
It's just comments. I mean, it was never mean, of course, but it was just like add a penguin or whatever, like
Oh,
some random shit. But I mean, it cracked me up, and I thought sometimes late at night in the studio when I was really alone, it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. It was fun.
Nika also asks, who are some folks that you love that you don't think get enough recognition? People that you might also draw inspiration from yourself, especially folks outside of the States.
I mean, there's one artist. I don't know if you know her, Yul Gordon. Uh, she is also
Oh, yeah,
from
yeah, yeah.
And she is also like a former student of Anke Feuchtenberger, but it's totally not in her style. But she has this beautiful, very scratchy, uh, terrible line that's like I think it's a nib pen that's extremely like I don't know, like it's brutal on open paper, just like bleeding out and also her stories they're I mean they're dark and brutal in a way, but I find them extremely funny. I can write her name in
Yeah,
in
it's J-U-L-G, correct? Or
yeah, yeah. And then
Julgordon. Yeah, they're brilliant. They're a great artist.
yeah, she's I mean she's been around for so long, and she is published now by Colorama, and here and there she's published, but there is no consistency. Like one publisher should take all of her work and like put it out one after the other. I feel like it would be great.
Yeah,
And who else? Oh God, there's so many people where I think like, holy shit, why do I only find one book here in this weird bookstore or in this weird fair or something? It's strange. I mean, who I really also appreciate is Yan Song from China. He's also funny. I mean, I write it down. He's
that's someone
fun.
I'm unfamiliar with. What's their, can you write out their name?
I mean, it's somewhere on the shelf. I won't find it in 1 second. But he is. I mean, he also draws animals, but also lately he does draw himself. How he goes to shopping to Uniqlo or something, or how he's lazy as an artist in his flat in Beijing. And it's. I mean, it's so melancholic, and his now he does a lot of pencil drawings, and they're so beautiful. They are such beautiful sceneries of Beijing at night, and when he goes on walks. And then he is in the middle, and he's usually this like sloppy typical comic artist with like, I don't know, some just some shorts and like a bit chubby and like a beard and a cigarette and just like like this slop and these beautiful drawings. It's a weird and nice contrast.
Those sound amazing. There's a question from Cassia, and she says, "What are the best places for comic artists to live?"
Well, I think Leipzig is pretty good. It's boring, but it's cheap. There's a lot of comic artists here. I think Angoulême, I mean, a lot of people say it's also extremely boring when the festival isn't happening. But the good part is they have this residency program where you can go from 2 months up to 2 years, and they equip you with a studio in the House of Authors, they call it. It's a studio building, and also give you a room or a flat even. I mean, you should totally look into their application forms. Now you can do it in English. For years it was only in French, but now you can apply in English, and I think 3 times a year. I think the next deadline is February 1st. And I think, I mean, if it's totally worth looking into it because I know of a lot of Americans who stayed there for a long time because it's in the middle of France. It's close to Bordeaux. It's a beautiful area. You don't have to spend a whole lot of money. You have a lot of time and space to work on your stuff.
Yeah, I think Jason Shiga has done that from the US. Aiden Koch, I
Roman
believe.
Muradov, Mark Bell. I mean, he's Canadian, but yeah, I mean, and a lot more. I've books I don't even know, but also my friend and studio mate Max Beitinger, he was just there for 4 months. And you can even bring your family. I mean, if you have children, I mean, they have to go to a French school or French kindergarten, but they make it possible to bring your family and equip you with a little flat. And yeah, it's cool.
Eva asks, Anna, did you also design your website? The format fitted so well with your work. I love your cursor. And also, what is your spirit animal and what is your dream project?
Yeah, my website, I mean, the initial design is made by me, but my friend Jonas, who I share a studio with as well, he is a web designer, and I stood behind him with a whip. I was like, do it like this, and he made everything possible. So props go out to him and his coding. That's for sure. My spirit animal, we. Maybe a mouse or something like, I don't know, some hidden creature. I'm not so hidden or like private, but it's just I don't know. I like that little unspectacular fur, and I like mouse hair. I don't know. And dream project. Oh, holy shit! I was talking to a friend of mine a week ago. I want to make a whole airplane of Lufthansa.
Oh,
I
wow.
want to I want to do the drawing, the whole design of a Lufthansa airplane. Doesn't have to be a jumbo jet, but yeah, one of the bigger jets.
I think that would be a dream mode of transportation for us too. So that's let's hope that happens. Nika has another question. Um, Drifter is so poetic and beautiful from the writing to the images. I agree. I agree. And I was curious what comes first, or how do they interact? Do you ever just write everything and then add in the drawings afterwards, or do the images first, or is it just more organic?
With Drifter, it was coming together step by step. Like that was pretty equal. Sometimes I had the drawing first, and then I looked out for the words that could accompany it. And sometimes I had just a line, like the character I had in mind, and then I searched for an image that would fit. That was actually pretty organic in a way. And then back in the day with the artist, where I had a deadline every week, I wrote the text first, and that helped a lot to lay the whole comic out a little bit. Um, and but I usually enjoy the process of drawing and writing like at the same time because sometimes I need to get to know my staff, like my personnel, and I have to see them drawn, and then I can think about their conversation or their voices a bit better. I mean, I usually have the story in mind, like the overall kind of thing, but the exact words I usually find them when I have a couple of pages ready and when I have a look at the scenery and the folks that are on them.
People are writing in the chat that the artist you mentioned is spelled Y-A-N, Yan Kong, Yancong, for anyone watching this on YouTube. Um, Cassia also asks, do you have any rituals that get you in the mood to draw, or do you hop right to it?
Hmm. I mean, I'm in the luxurious position that I can go to the studio every day, and I share. It's 5 rooms, and I share the whole floor with 13 other people, artists usually. And it's, I mean, as soon as I open the door there, um, it's made for doing something. But I also like we have a huge couch, and I can spend days on it just laying there and looking at comic books or reading some other stuff. And, but that also, I mean, feels like doing something. I mean, I would beat myself up if I would do it at home. I have a hard time with free time, but when I'm in the studio, I can be lazy there. And it helps a lot. Then you don't feel so useless. I guess if you can share the room with somebody, or like the studio with somebody, and then it doesn't feel so, yeah, lonely and yeah, you don't feel unproductive even if you don't do anything for some reason.
Can I ask you to?
I, I
Oh yeah,
have no,
please.
I have no routine. It's because now I'm 38 years old and I don't get so nervous anymore when I don't find a good start to draw because I know eventually it will come. And it's sometimes I just have to sit it out and stare at some stuff. It's there are good days where I get a lot of stuff done, and then there are bad days where I get nothing done. But I learned to live with it, and I stopped beating myself up. It's that's helpful actually.
Can I get just follow up a little with what you just said about like you have a hard time with free time? I actually think that's something that I think a lot of artists can share that maybe isn't discussed that much. Or I don't know if that's I think for artists I understand exactly what you mean, but maybe people who don't make art might not process that as well. Could you explain that a little bit more? A hard time with free time?
Yeah, I mean, every time I don't really do vacation like in the classical sense. Like the only times I travel are for book fairs or comic festivals or readings or visiting exhibitions of other people. It's always related, of course, to what I love, and it's never just a random spot. It's maybe I should try it actually. But it's always it always serves a purpose. I mean, it sounds
Right.
stupid, but it's it's just a fact, I guess. And also with free time, I mean, I spend pretty much all of my day and a good chunk of the evening in the studio. and I don't mind it. I love it. But I mean, at home, I don't have like hobbies or something. Like I don't do sports. Yeah, I mean, everything I love is also my life. Maybe it could be a dilemma, but actually, it's something very luxurious, or yeah, something I'm also grateful for.
Yeah, it's a
I sometimes think like, how do people do it without a passion like this? How do they get through life?
it's a gift, I think. I mean, I think it is that I agree with what you said. There's two more questions in the chat. I want to make everyone aware that it is most people are watching this in the US. It is 6 hours later for Anna, so I really thank you for taking the time. There's two more questions. Do you have time for if
Yeah, yeah,
someone
of
asks
course.
another after these? Okay, we'll do these two and we'll see if people have more. Francis Lyons asks, wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the conversation with publishers around printing and design decisions, especially the money side of things. How to go to bat for decisions that may be more expensive or out of their printing norm. Yeah, I mean, I'd like answer to these questions as well. Or how to go to bat for decisions where you may not know the feasibility of making them happen or how much of a price difference they could make. Alrighty, thank you. One thing that I just like to add on top of that is I often think publishers don't understand maybe a decision will cost $500 more, but you'll sell, if it looks better, you'll sell $500 more worth. That's always what I try to say. It's like, well, let's just spend a little bit more money. It'll be better for the books. If you're concerned about sales, making it a beautiful object will do
Yeah,
that. But
but yeah, I mean, those things are definitely discussed and they come up really early because some publishers are like, oh, we cannot afford this. And then I'm like, give it to my hands. I can search for paper that's cheaper and I find it. Like I would be able to find it that like a similar paper that's cheaper than I mean, if that's a problem, I can work with this or like I can at least make suggestions. That's something I can offer. I do offer sometimes, and that I have a look into the catalogs or like order some samples or whatever, and just to make it budget friendly. And it's also in my interest because I don't like books to be too expensive. It's I I like to make the books as cheap as possible, but without looking cheap. So on the same page as the publishers usually, but the argument of that a good book design is always expensive doesn't work. Because I think a soft cover, a very cheap one, can be extremely beautiful if you make the right decisions. And yeah. And sometimes, I mean, publishers were so afraid for years of spot colors, and they're so slightly more expensive nowadays. If you just take the magenta out and put a nice bright orange in, you change the whole look, and it makes it so much more brilliant and exciting. Like the early children's books, like I think they all had like spot colors. And yeah, I mean, sometimes the publishers have to look like have to get quotes themselves, and then they're surprised sometimes, like, oh, it's not that expensive even. They didn't even try it sometimes.
I think you, because you have this, I think it's important to every artist how their book looks. I think you're unique in that you are ready to do the work to investigate it. I think there's the majority of artists are just going to accept that the publisher visually knows best and economically knows best. But to anyone listening to this talk, I think if you're an artist and you feel that I think artists know best most of the time. They know they shouldn't be intimidated by a publisher's knowledge because often a publisher is very set in their ways and advocating for how you want the book to look is, I think, more often than not the right way. And then it should at the very least, I always think, be there's some things that publishers can't do. They can't accommodate every whim of an artist, but it should be a discussion at minimum.
Yeah, I think it's really also in their interest, and some publishers are really thankful also for suggestions because not every publishing house has the personnel to have also like the production person usually also has other jobs in the publishing house, and then they can't also be so like into the newest paper stock or whatever. And I would suggest to every artist too to reach out to the big companies who make either paper stock or the like book jacket material to send you samples because they do that. If you ask for certain stuff, they send you a big folder and then you can look through the material because it's best if you know what's out there and then you can choose and suggest. Because the publishers usually also they have maybe two, three, four different paper stocks they work with. They know it works well, and then they don't put the work in to look into different stuff.
And I
But
think in terms of book size, it's good to ask those questions too, because I think the tendency is to think, oh, a smaller size will be cheaper. But oftentimes if you talk directly with the printer, you know,
Mhm.
the paper for them is cheap, the ink, whatever, but the labor they're doing that you end up paying for is cutting things down a lot of the time. So sometimes if you print things a bit larger than you had intended to, it ends up being cheaper because they have to do less because it just fits to the sheet a little bit better. And so I think yeah, it's always worth, I mean, the printer is the one that knows and won't have any bias about how they think things should be done. They'll tell you what they're capable of doing.
Yeah, that is a pity for US publishers because they always have to print overseas, and it's so hard to be in communication, I think, with the printers because they're the time difference, language barriers, and yeah, I think it's hard because here in Europe, at least, you have your two, three printers you work with, and then they already know what you might want.
Right.
You can really talk directly to them and have them on the phone and stuff. But yeah, that's unfortunate that it's not everywhere like this.
US publishers might have to unlearn that very soon.
Yeah,
Uh,
all the printers have to step it up. Like, because I mean, I saw some uh, printing at some printers workspace like of a big printing company, and I looked at their grid and I was like, wow, that looks like it's printed in the 80s. Like there's
hmm.
no new technology, and like and I think like you need to maybe um yeah get
You mean
it
US
up there,
printers?
get the standard up.
You mean printers in the United States?
Offset printers. Like I am not talking about like artistic like Riso printer, not at all,
Right,
but
yeah,
like
yeah.
offset printing places, they are really far behind every technology that's possible and anywhere else, I feel.
There are still a lot of newsprint printers that I don't think I think they actually sync up a little with what you're saying about the cost and the readability. I I think for the books that I print, I love printing them here in the city because there's still the remnants of the newsprint newspaper industry still chugging along in certain places. Samuel asks, with everyone having gotten excited with Tsuge and Man Without Talent recently, I was wondering if you have any plans to make any more haiku comics. 20th century haiku has a lot of wild and insane characters that seem reminiscent of your comics. You've related haiku to cartooning in terms of being both anthropomorphic. You've also talked about how Bill Watterson talking about how animals are talking about how funny animals are automatically funny. Sorry if this question is too all over the place. And I just want to interject. If other people have a question, I would really ask now. Would be the right time to do it.
Yeah, I mean haikus. I wrote a couple of new ones, but it's I like to sprinkle them into comics. But a whole haiku comic book, it's strange to read them one after the other. I just have them right now on the phone notes app, and when I see the haikus following each other, it's whiny and pathetic a little bit. But yeah, I like to yeah throw them in where they fit for a new book or something. Then here and there a haiku will definitely appear. What was the second part? The anthropomorphic part. Um, yeah, I
Bill
mean, I
Watterson
think
saying funny animals are always funny.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm in the tradition of funny animals, and I mean, I think drama is pretty funny, and yeah, so it's the definition probably of fun that makes it even more funny. But I think Bill Watterson also said that if you draw a penguin with the New York Times on the toilet, that's a cute sight. But if you do this with a human character, then it might be disgusting or yeah, whatever. And I liked how he said that the animal character is so flexible, and I totally go with that. Yeah.
Francis asks a follow-up question. Do you have paper companies in the US? Are there paper companies that you like that are available in the US?
That is such a difficult question because right now in Europe there's two companies sharing the whole chunk. It's INAPA and IGEPA. I don't know if they even deliver to the US, and they have all the good, like they own Munchen, they own Schöllerhammer, like all the good old paper mills, but also they are a big part of destroying like little paper companies, little paper mills, because there's two monopoles right now, and yeah, they are doing a terrible job at destroying a whole cultural heritage. I don't know about the US. I mean, there must be tons of paper mills actually in New England with all the wood, and I don't know what their company names are. But I think it's sometimes it's worth looking into smaller companies and not buying via the big sellers. I mean, if you have a smaller project, uh, a book you want to make, a reso book or something, sometimes you go like write the mill directly because the salesmen and saleswomen they do a terrible job, at least in Europe at the moment. They are part of destroying the whole diversity in paper.
Well, I mean, on that note, it should be noted that I think there might be some change in the US, if certain promise, if certain threatened policies come through about how publishers here rely on printing their books overseas. And I think with what you just said about destroying cultural heritages through the process of getting the paper, the the environmental cost of printing a huge amount of books overseas and shipping it over here is vast. So I really do hope that there's some conversation that happens for printing books within the US. And then I think artists will be able to, working with publishers, ask US printers more direct questions about how the decisions that go into their books. I could see that happening, and that I think that would be very good.
Yeah, I think we will all be forced to work more locally anyways, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
the politics will force us, but also, yeah, I think the environmental results. Yeah, I think it's always worth like talking to people directly and just ask questions because I think that's something they are maybe not used to, but I think if you stay friendly, usually they're very generous and send you samples. They want to interact with their customers and want to keep you as, of course, as a client. So I think it's always worth trying a bit harder than to go with the usual offered stuff.
Yeah,
I
well, I
mean,
think
of course, don't be a pain in the ass to the publishers and like to every company because you want 3 sheets of paper. But I think it's always it can turn into a nice conversation, and I think also people feel valued what they are doing if you show interest.
I think that's what's come through in talking about this with you. It's that I mean, there's a creativity obviously involved in working on drawing, working on writing, combining them, the creativity of cartooning itself. But there is creativity involved in the process of bookmaking, and I think a real you by being in control of that process to a degree, that's how that's how you make experiments and how your work gets presented. And I really think that caring about how, I had an old publisher that said, don't worry about finishing this book in time for a festival. The festival is 2 days. This book hopefully will last for much, much longer. It's going to be around and people are going to see it and you're going to have to see it for a long time. So the process of making the book is it's odd that it would ever be undervalued, but especially in a visual medium, it's so, so important.
hmm Yeah, I mean, when I go to fairs or little festivals, I usually look for books um, or booklets that are made in a unusual way because I love to keep these things as a reference and they often remind me of what's possible. And sometimes you can ask what kind of paper stock they used. And I think, I mean, I always share this info because, I mean, it's no secret. These companies are out there, but it's always also worth asking the fellow cartooning colleagues who did a cool little object. It's always worth asking what's the font you use, what's the paper, blah blah blah. I
Let
mean,
me
there's no
just
shame in this, and I think we should all share more of this information because only like this we can keep this whole ecosystem alive, actually, because we depend on it, on each other yeah, with the paper mills existing, with the printers, and with everything.
I think that's very true. Let me just leave you with one question, Anna, and thank you for everyone who's asked questions, and thank you again for staying up so late. What can readers in the U.S. look forward to next from you as a book that we can hold in our hands?
Yeah, there is a third artist book, Songs to the Feather, that's entirely in songs. It's a bird opera. That should be out in English. I don't know the date yet, but it's ready to go actually. And then I'm working on a children's book, but
Oh, great.
yeah, I'm so scared to start, but yeah, it will happen soon. But yeah, I have big respect for this genre.
And that's a children's book that we'll be able to get here.
I mean, I have to write it first in
Oh, okay.
German and draw it, but yeah, it will be eventually. Of course, I would hope it will be translated, but let's see. But yeah,
Well,
the Songs to the Feather, the third artist book should be available at any time.
and that'll be from Breakdown, and it'll be
Yeah,
distributed here.
it should be a breakdown. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's in the making, but yeah, I think we were both a bit lazy at the moment, or like busy with other stuff. Not lazy, but lazy in communication and busy with other stuff.
Well, thank you so much, Anna. This was really beautiful, and it was a pleasure talking about this stuff with you. And thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Of course.
All
Okay, I'll talk to you later.
right, cool. Good night. Oh yeah,
Bye.
good evening. Bye bye.
Bye. And thanks to everyone for participating. And next week, I should say, will be the last meeting of this calendar of the New York Comic Symposium. And it will be Mark Sobol talking about his companion book to the first volume of Love and Rockets. So anyone who's a Love and Rockets fan, that'll be a really, really fun talk with Mark at the same time, Tuesday at the same time, same way to register for it. So thank you all so much. Bye.